Join me as I dive deep into the life of David and try to uncover why he was called a man after God's own heart. Let's see if I can figure it out. David is one of the most complex and intriguing figures in the Bible, with a life marked by great triumphs and devastating failures. Yet, despite his imperfections, he's often referred to as a man after God's own heart. What does this phrase really mean, and what aspects of David's life led God to describe him in such a unique way? Many of us tend to put David on a pedestal, thinking he was some kind of superhero who never made mistakes. But the truth is, David faced incredible challenges throughout his life, and he often struggled with the same doubts, fears, and weaknesses we do. In fact, if we're being honest, some of his actions can be downright disturbing. Who can forget the time he betrayed Uriah the Hittite and had him murdered? Not exactly the actions of a saint, right? Yet, despite these mistakes, God still considered David a man after his own heart. It's easy to get caught up in the highlights reel of David's life, the victorious battles, the wise leadership, the beautiful psalms, but we often gloss over the messy parts. We forget that David was a complex, multifaceted person with his own set of flaws and shortcomings. And if we're not careful, we can start to think that David's relationship with God was somehow unattainable, that he was somehow more spiritual or more deserving of God's love than we are. But the reality is, David's story is full of contradictions. He was both a hero and a villain, a leader and a failure, a saint and a sinner. And it's precisely this complexity that makes his story so relatable, so human, and so beautifully redemptive. So, what exactly did God see in David that led him to describe him as a man after his own heart? Was it his bravery in the face of Goliath? His unwavering trust in God's promises? His unrelenting passion for worship and prayer? Let's dive deeper into David's life and explore some specific examples that might give us a glimpse into this unique description. David's faith was truly something special. He had an unwavering trust in God's goodness and sovereignty, even when things seemed bleak. Remember the time he was on the run from King Saul, hiding in caves and dodging arrows? Despite the danger and uncertainty, David never lost faith in God's protection and provision. He knew that God was his rock, his refuge, and his salvation, and he clung to that truth with every fiber of his being. David's repentance was also a hallmark of his relationship with God. When he sinned, he owned up to it and begged for forgiveness. He didn't try to hide behind excuses or justifications. Remember the psalm he wrote after his affair with Bathsheba? It's one of the most raw, honest, and broken prayers in the entire Bible, and it's precisely this kind of vulnerability that allowed David to experience God's mercy and forgiveness in a profound way. David's leadership was another key aspect of his life that showcased his heart for God. He was a warrior, a statesman, and a poet, but above all, he was a shepherd. He understood that true leadership isn't about power or prestige, but about serving and caring for others. And he did it all with a deep sense of humility and dependency on God. One of the most pivotal moments in David's life has got to be his confrontation with Goliath. Can you think of a more iconic showdown in the entire Bible? David's trust in God was put to the test in a major way, and he passed with flying colors. He didn't rely on his own strength or cunning. Instead, he trusted in God's power and provision, and the result was a stunning victory that shook the foundations of the Philistine army. But David's heart for God is perhaps most beautifully captured in his Psalms, those raw, honest, and deeply personal prayers that he poured out to God. He didn't just write about God, he wrote from a deep place of intimacy and connection with Him. He wasn't afraid to express his doubts, his fears, and his weaknesses, and in doing so, he showed us that true worship is about vulnerability, not veneer. David's legacy is a powerful reminder that our hearts can be transformed, that we can be men and women after God's own heart. So, what does it take to cultivate this kind of heart? It takes faith, repentance, leadership, and a deep commitment to worship and prayer. It takes embracing our weaknesses and failures, and trusting in God's goodness and sovereignty. And it takes humility, a willingness to acknowledge that we're not the heroes of our own stories, but that God is the one who writes our narratives. So, what do you think? How do you relate to David's story, and what attributes do you think are essential for cultivating a heart after God's own heart? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to tune in next time when we explore more biblical heroes who inspire and challenge us.